So what builds trust, first of all, is listening. And anybody that's a stylist can relate to that because that's part of what we do with our consultations with our clients, right? So, it's really making sure they're feeling heard. So there's where the big trust thing comes from. And then along with being heard is taking, action or supporting or recognizing what you just did here so that you can help have solutions, and that's really how I approach it. If you really want to get simple, there's needs and there's solutions. So it works whether it's with your clients, and actually my clients are my team first and foremost. It really is learning just to take that and not make something more out of it than what it is in some ways. We all can get in our heads sometimes and think we have to know everything.
Welcome to Brazen and Bold. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, twirling around the dance floor to salon owner. He's had quite the journey. It's so wonderful to welcome to the show, Mitch Eubanks.
Well, thank you, Heather. It's good to be here.
I'm so happy that before we recorded this, we actually had a chance to meet in person at Premiere recently. It was such a pleasure to run into you at the cocktail reception and just get to see you and your amazing contagious energy live and in person. You're such a fun soul. And it was such an amazing event just to connect with so many of my friends from the industry. Did you have a great time at Premiere?
I enjoy it for the same reasons. The networking is just seeing people that I don't see every day, but when we see each other, it's just like we saw them yesterday.
Right. I love it. We have the best industry. Speaking of the best industry, I was very young, like today years old, when I found out that you used to be a principal dancer. You were a professional ballerino, and that was your career before becoming a stylist. I think that's so fun. Tell me, how long were you a dancer, and kind of led you from that, skipping into owning an award-winning salon for all these years?
Okay, so I really have always been creative and artistic, and was late into the dance world, kind of late finding myself, but right from a performing arts high school, went to college because my parents said I had to go to college. So I have Bachelor of Fine Arts and Performing Arts, and I could have been a mama's boy really easily. So I decided to make sure I did not go back home after college and ended up in Florida because I roommate in college and they needed men for a summer workshop with the ballet company in Orlando, Southern Ballet Theater at the time. Now it's Orlando Ballet. And I was with them for 4 years and really worked up. They actually hired me to play Drosselmeyer for their Nutcracker because of my theater background in the arts. So they call that a character dancer. And then I worked my way up to be, what I consider, one of the principal dancers in the company before I decided to retire. And, I had difficult being a starving artist, and my wants and needs started to change. So I looked for something else. There were 3 things. It was hair design, interior design, or fashion design. And interior and fashion were a lot more schooling. Still had my college loan I was paying on. Hair was quick and inexpensive. Went to a vocational school and started with a guy while I was in school as an assistant. Was with him for 13 years. Then I opened up my own place. So in 7 years of the industry, I've worked in 2 locations. One of them was mine.
Amazing. So you were in the industry for 13 years when you decided to branch off on your own. What was it that led to you making that choice? And how did that person you started your career with feel about it? Were they supportive, or what did that transition look like?
So the transition was not real smooth. What made me make that decision is I had done everything at that point in the industry that I think you could. I worked as an assistant. I worked as an educator. I worked as a top stylist in a salon. I worked as a national platform artist. Actually getting a corporate position with a manufacturer. That was probably about the only other thing left. Just happened that, before I told my owner of 13 years, who had taken me under his wing, he was selling. And he hadn't told me that he was selling, and I hadn't told him I was leaving. And I was a big part of that package.
So 2 people got surprised at the same time.
Yeah. So I came in one day and just was told to leave and come back that night to get all my things. And that was pretty much that. We were both working together in that salon. So we were both out of work at the same time.
Overnight.
Yes. Overnight with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
So you basically had a sink or swim moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I did a lot of hair cutting in garages and whatever I could do at people's homes to get by because I couldn't get the CO yet on my place, even though it was under construction. so I couldn't open that. So it was a little crazy. And then they came in with non-competes, and anyone that didn't sign them was also told to leave. And so I kind of felt responsible for some other people being out of work. So yeah, it was quite the crazy anyway. But
how long was it that you were doing hair in garages? How long was that time frame like?
It was probably so I was let go in February, and I was able to open the salon in April 1st.
Okay, so it wasn't that long, but that was the messy middle. And how many of the people from the team that wouldn't sign non-competes did you wind up assimilating?
Because I didn't tell anybody, and I moved like 6 miles away. So, because I didn't know that the guy was selling. So out of respect, I didn't want to be like competition necessarily. I moved further out of town, the whole bit. So, but with that said, I probably had in the beginning, maybe just about 4 people, probably.
Okay.
Around about
so
4.
you took on several people who had left around the same time. What was your road like becoming a leader? And I know one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was the walkout that you experienced, because I think that's something that affects a lot of people in a team-based environment, and it can be devastating when it happens. And a lot of times it's a shock, especially when you care for your team, you're invested, you think you're showing up the way you should. I would love to hear, how that journey went as you took on more people and then ultimately found yourself facing a walkout, kind of what that whole experience was like. Walk us through it and how you survived, and maybe share some of your biggest takeaways from that, the lessons that you learned.
Okay. Well, let me give you a timeline first. So I opened in 2000. By 2003, I thought I was going to go out of my mind. I even hired a therapist, and then I ended up finding, coaching within our industry in about 2003 with a company. That was an immense help. So by like 2005, I was at the peak of my game. I was over, $1 million in revenue. I only had 9 stations, at the most like 12 operators, extremely heavy volume. And the majority of the people working for me because over the time, not everybody right at first, but they kind of trickled in. They were all peers. And so, of course, you all of a sudden go from a peer to an owner. That had many challenges in itself. That was my realization that not everybody is like you. So, anyway, so with all of that and through my coaching was great. And it helped me really grow. I mean, tremendously grow in a short amount of time.
I was about to say the turnaround time. The turnaround time you're describing is about 2 years between thinking you're going to lose your mind and then really feeling like you'd hit the peak of your stride. That's amazing.
But my lesson in all that is I was a very good parrot. I could say and do exactly what my consultant would tell me to do. And what ended up happening, what created the walkout, and that happened in about 2006. So we also had the housing market going crazy, especially here in Florida. And then I had this walkout. I just got into a very large home. I was succeeding, and everything was going to be awesome, and this is great, and I could pull away from the chair. But I ended up experiencing in 2006, I'd have one stylist leave 1 month, and the next month. So over like a 6-month, 7-month period, I had 8 stylists leave out of a team of 12.
Wow.
And over the years, I've kept in contact with, the people, and, have let things go and learned not to try to take it personally. But, the lesson for me is that I was missing the why behind, in my head, it was like, this is great. You're going to make more money. I'm going to make more money. But to them, it was all about the numbers, because I'm a little driven. So I would be like, okay, we did this. Okay, let's do this now. Okay, we did that. Let's do this next. A lot of owners, I sure can relate to that. And, not everybody is like us, because they'd all own salons. So that, that's the other thing too. So it's about, so that was one of my biggest takeaways with that whole experience. And, so I went from, over $1 million to maybe 500,000 the next year.
Your business was cut in half in the space of a year, and you lost, 2/3 of your team, basically.
Yeah. So
when your stylists left, were they giving you feedback, or were you just starting to gather this over time?
Over time, when I was actually even in a place where I would be receptive to it, because, this is the first time it happened. Never mind. You don't want to be kind. Let's put it that way.
Speak freely. Just don't name names. Were any stylists harmed in the making of this walkout?
No, they weren't. No. But, again, really difficult. So, my dreams of succeeding in success kind of really quickly vanished. And I felt it was just extremely personal. I felt it was very intentional. I felt at that time like because we used to work together and now they were working for me, that they just really wanted to make my life difficult.
Yeah. And that does feel personal, especially when you nurtured them. And this was how long after you started coaching? What year was the walkout?
Around about 3 years.
This walkout was pretty significant. What year was it that you experienced it? How long after the peak of your success did it drop that quickly?
Coaching started in probably 2003. Walkout occurred the end of 2006. So 2007 was the year that was significantly less.
And that was a stressful time anyway. Like there was a lot that was happening in the housing market and in the stock market at that time. So that was probably a very, very tender time for you. I can only imagine. You mentioned that you went through I could parrot everything they gave me. Like you're really going in after the numbers and coaching to the big picture. It sounds like something that you missed was really the foundational in the relationship. Looking back, and this is a difficult thing to reflect on and share, but it's been time and you've recovered clearly and well. What that looked like, what do you think was missing in that component of, because there's drive and it's really critical and we're not going to change how driven we are as leaders or business owners, and we shouldn't. Where did you find that miss to be?
The enrollment of my team, really going to them and asking questions and finding out what their needs were, and then being there for support and guidance instead of, okay, I need you to do this. I come from a world of just do it, whether you want to get into generational differences or whatever, but, and worked for me, having a dance background.
I think it's very applicable. I actually think it is. Yeah. So, you're fresh 45-year-old.
I didn't get that last part. What was that?
I just said, you're just a fresh young 45-year-old. But let's talk about the generational difference. Just do it. That worked for you. That worked when you were building your career. You were coming up in the hair industry in the 80s, right? Yes.
I'd get screamed at, embarrassed in front of clients. Not that it was right, and not that I would ever do that. I was not that type of owner by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just part of what it was. And
that's just how you did it.
Yeah, and from my dance background, it's the same thing. I mean, you're in a class, and we did a little honoring of our instructor that we had in college recently. And on the video, I actually said, I knew I did something correct if she didn't say anything to me as I went across the floor, because the only time she would say anything is if you were doing something wrong.
Which is
so that
totally different. That doesn't work now.
No, totally doesn't. Totally doesn't. So there has been a lot of learnings for me through the years. And, so again, it's just really about learning how to be support. And I really want to share that now in our industry. And, I'm going to have an opportunity here to be doing that because I do it with my team now. I have a wonderful team. We are in a very much of a growth period, but, it's just nice to have that warm and fuzzy again. I don't know how else to explain that in a more technical term, but it's just, I really do feel that my leadership is well received. They have an idea that I'm coming from a good place. That's what it's about.
I mean, you're really talking about connection and relationship in that. Talk to me a little bit about how having that curiosity, helping your team tap into their why and how to listen to that. How does that build trust, and how has that given you momentum? And what does that look like day to day? You mentioned knowing what really motivates them. Just do it doesn't work anymore. Well, can you tell me what does work now? What's working to rebuild that in your team?
So what builds trust, first of all, is listening. And anybody that's a stylist can relate to that because that's part of what we do with our consultations with our clients, right? So, it's really making sure they're feeling heard. So there's where the big trust thing comes from. And then along with being heard is taking, action or supporting or recognizing what you just did here so that you can help have solutions, and that's really how I approach it. If you really want to get simple, there's needs and there's solutions. So it works whether it's with your clients, and actually my clients are my team first and foremost. It really is learning just to take that and not make something more out of it than what it is in some ways. We all can get in our heads sometimes and think we have to know everything.
None of us get in our own heads and overthink things ever. Stop it.
So, yeah, I just think that really enrolling them, making sure they feel heard, and, making it a team effort, truly. It's not me and then the team. I am also part of that team. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
what at.
I think that's great. And that's very helpful as far as what can someone do who might be finding themselves in that position, or who, like anybody who owns a business, we do it to make money. This is not a nonprofit. So how can we do that but still show up with soul? And speaking of that, how do you speak to the goals of your team member and also your own business needs using data to motivate them, to enlist them, but also to make sure that it's like connecting with their inner core? How do you bridge that gap?
So I try to find out what they're wanting. So, recently I sat down with them and I was like, okay, do you have any idea how much you want to, just, at the end of the year, what do you want that W-2 to say on it? Like how dollar amount do you want on there? And then just literally kind of working backwards and really helping them realize, okay, so, all right, great. You got to figure you have taxes. Okay, fine. Let's just kind of ignore that for the moment. But, and work backwards and see what that means as far as what they have to bring into the salon. We are a commission-based salon. I do have a level system. I do have a career program.
Yes.
They can move up to different levels of pricing. They can move up to different levels of commission. It gets to a certain point and they cap out at the commission, but that doesn't mean they can't continue to pricing. So, and it's about looking at what they're wanting to achieve and then saying, okay, so this is what can happen. If you're hitting these type of targets, then you can move up to this goal. And then if you hit this, then you can move up to this level. So that is a simplistic way to put it, but, everybody has their own little way, but, there is a system there, and I'm very clear on what that is. And, numbers don't lie. And I make sure that they have an awareness of their numbers. But again, going back to why that is important off of what they've told me they're wanting.
Yeah, excellent. And what you're describing is a career pathway, a really clear roadmap for them where you're breaking it down based on what their needs are and then giving them step-by-step ways to achieve that. So that's really partnering with them in their career, which I think feels very supportive. So to that point, when, you are working with a software company to develop a coaching, I was kind of shocked to find out that salon owners use only around 20% of the data from their software. That's an entire 80% that's left untapped. I would love it if you spoke to our listeners about what ways there are out there that use, like the quickest ways or the most common ways you see salon owners misusing their software, or reports that they could be pulling to improve their business numbers that they're not even aware of. Talk to me about that missing 80% and what it might be like to work with someone like yourself in coaching to get more out of what they're doing in their software and their numbers.
Okay, so obviously there are many different software companies out there, and they all have their pluses and minuses. So really what's missing is just asking, really looking and asking your software company for educational support. And most of them have, they're all going to have that. But we basically use the POS, online booking, obviously the appointment book, maybe the payroll piece of it. But, there are reports in there. You can do forecasting reports. You can look at, the performance individually. Some of them have, a lot of them now have goals, real-time goals set up. So like you can put in what you had that conversation with your stylist and put those numbers into your software. And then it kind of does the work for you, and they have access to it. So they can kind of see where they are, what they're telling you they want. And even just having a dashboard that lets them know what they brought in that week. I think it's better to be transparent. And give them the numbers so that they're able to see, what they are doing. We talked about people like ourselves, we're very motivated, very driven. And it's not that team isn't. It's just that if they don't have access to it, they don't know where to go. If you don't know where you are on the map, and you have a place you want to be, you got to have an idea of how to get to point A to point B, basically. So
giving them access to those numbers, like with your team regularly, maybe in your one-on-ones or coaching, just making sure they're aware of their numbers. So that's a big one, number one. Now, let's say somebody's making use of that. What are some other untapped? Obviously, each software company has their own reports, but what other numbers are you seeing that a lot of business owners are missing when they're looking at their reports, or that they could make better use out of?
Good question, because it's hard to know what, you only know what sometimes you think, oh, well, everybody knows the same thing. And then you realize not everybody knows the same thing. But, the KPIs that I think anybody would agree with that are important are, some of the main ones are like your average service ticket, average retail ticket. I refer to like a piece per client. It could be retail per client. Those things are very important. Retention. And all of those are accessible through your software. And the reason you want to know those things is you kind of want to have an idea of whether, first of all, are you working smarter? Ideally, and again, if you want to get into generational, everybody wants to do less and get more. So how do you create that for them? Average service ticket comes into play with that because you're looking at the amount of clients they have and their dollar amount. And, do they want a bunch, do they want $20, $50 tickets, or do they want, $10, $50 tickets, or do they want, five $100 tickets?
Right.
And, so those kind of reports and just the awareness of where to go in your software to find those things is helpful. So with myself and creating a partnership with STX Inspire, which is their cloud-based version, I feel like having a little bit of consulting and coaching support and not just tech support can be very helpful. So that's what we're getting ready to launch with Inspire for Success.
Which is lovely. And I think it's really important for anybody listening, if you don't have that kind of support or those resources, ask your software company. There might be someone who can walk through it with you, or somebody they can set you up with who can help you in that. Whether or not they have a formal program set up or something like that, it's just really important to have someone guide you to get the most of your numbers. And I would say no matter where you're at in your business ownership or in your journey as a stylist or solopreneur, there's always more resources you could have. And to find somebody who has better use of that data and just ask questions. I think especially if you've been in the industry a long time, the people who are really thriving are the ones who are open-minded to all the things they don't know and asking better questions, getting better answers. So just stay open to that and finding someone, whether within your company or within the network who uses your company, you can ask to give you ideas and, hey, how are you using that? Or what reports are you pulling? Or what are your numbers like for this? Or what should my target be? Because what was working even a few years ago is not working any longer. And especially if we're talking about what was working in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you're getting yelled at by your salon owner. And now it's like, that would never fly, nor would we suggest it, but just understanding how different the climate and the culture of modern team members are. Especially now, we have more generations in the workforce at the same time than ever at any moment in history. We have people staying employed longer, and we have people getting into their field younger. And so just thinking of all the different styles of communication, motivation, and how they show up to work. If you don't have that dialed in, you are missing a ton, especially if you're a leader in your salon or if you're looking to become a leader. Just understanding what it takes to motivate someone who's in their 60s, sometimes even 70s, versus someone who's in their teens. And it's a pretty cool, if not somewhat elusive skill to tap into to be able to do that. But I think it's great that you mentioned referencing, finding that resource.
Yeah. I mean, and I do love it. I mean, it keeps me young. Like, it's a vibe.
I love that. I want to know, so having been in this industry for so many years, almost spanning 4 decades, what is your current favorite hair product that you wish existed when you were first starting as a stylist?
Actually, more of a hair tool.
What were you doing? Did you put an ironing board out? Did you ever have the ironing board for the curly hair people?
To learn to blow out curly hair and get it sleek and smooth is a lost art now, because you don't have to do that now. That was one of the biggest things that it's so, yeah, not necessarily a product, more of a tool, but yeah.
I think that totally counts. I would say dry shampoo. Dry shampoo for the win all day, every day.
Yes. Although they did have what was called PSSSSST.
Yeah, but I don't know when that started. I didn't hear about it until later, but I love dry shampoo. And I'll tell you, I remember my neighbor who had really, really coiled hair, and we would iron her hair on an ironing board. This is what we would do. We'd go over and she'd iron her hair once a week. Mm-hmm. Yeah, before the flat iron. And let's talk a little bit about the worst haircut you've ever given or that you've ever had.
The worst haircut I've ever given. I don't know if I can speak to that or not, because I don't know if I was ever brave enough to really do something that wrong.
Don't do something a little wrong, Mitch. You'll never do anything really right. Just so you know, if you don't do it a little bit off.
In client's ear with a curling iron, like you literally heard it sizzling like bacon. It was horrible. Like it took me a second to realize what it was, and I think it took her the second too. Burning flesh smell. It was horrible.
Oh my God.
Those kind of things stick with you for a while. So
I have one that I haven't told anybody ever. I said I have one that I never told anybody ever, and it wasn't the bad haircut. It was foiling their hair, and they turned their head right at the same time as the lightener blopped off of the brush rather than going onto the foil. Like it was just the perfect storm of foiling in the front of their face. It just splotched right in their eye.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I have just blinded somebody. They thankfully were very good natured about it, but it was, yes, like sizzling someone's ear off, horrifying, but my goodness.
Getting a strand of hair in someone's eye. I literally have had the experience of pulling, I don't know, like a 4-inch strand out of someone's eye that somehow got into their eye during our haircut. It was like that stuff's just crazy. It's just crazy stuff.
I love it, though. It's what happens when you're behind the chair long enough. I would also love to know, what would you tell, having been in this industry for so long, what would you tell someone just starting out? Or what kind of advice would you give to the younger, newly retired from ballet, Mitch, as a stylist? What kind of advice would you give somebody just starting in their career?
Just be inquisitive. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I recently got a young man in he's not fresh out of school, but he's very new to our industry. And it has been like the most energetic thing, because he is just so like, came back on his off time and asked if he could shadow a stylist, and the stylist just feels like a rock star. And it's like, yes, of course you can come in and watch me, just to have that environment, that's one of the things I feel that I can offer as a commissioned salon, and a team type environment. And it just feeds off of each other. So my thing to a new person would be, first of all, to find an environment that you feel fits. I always tell people when I'm interviewing them, just remember, you're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing you. Okay. And I let them know that, because they get so nervous. And it's like, no, I get it. You're nervous because you care. But you got to realize, like, I might not be the fit for you. Right. And if my wife gets upset with me, she goes, why do you tell them that? And I'm like, well, I don't want to spend this time to get somebody on my bus, and they're not even in the right seat or on the right bus in the first place. So just, really, it's okay not to know. It should be okay not to know. If you're made to feel like it's not okay not to know, then you need to be someplace else.
I like that. Also, something that's really important too is, like I say, the most dangerous people in any industry are the people who have all the answers. I am afraid of people who know everything. They scare me. And you can be an expert in something and have a lot of answers, but the people who know and are done being a sponge are the people that I actually have no more interest in learning from. Exactly. And for me, like, whether I'm consulting with someone or leading my team or having this conversation with you, it's really about like being open and knowing, I don't know all these. I've owned a salon for 25 years. I've been in the industry for 37. I still ask questions, like this guy that came in to shadow. It's a balayage technique. For me, I'm a foil guy. I'm not the one to instruct that, but I have people that can, and I'm okay. And I learn from it. So, and my team loves that. It's really cool. Like, it's like, okay, show me what you're doing. It's interesting because there is such a shift in our industry. The other big change is, it used to be, as a salon owner, you were the person that had all the answers for them. And it is not that way anymore. In the world of social media and influencers, you are kind of like, just happen to be the guy that is giving them a paycheck sometimes, so you really have to be aware of that and not be intimidated by that, because you still have a purpose. But it's very interesting how that has really shifted. And I think there's a lot of people that can get very arrogant and intimidated and insecure, because now it's like, well, they're not coming to me, or they're doing techniques that's like, where'd you learn that from? You didn't get that from me. And so it is like, there's just so many changes so quickly in our industry here. I think what a gift it is to have that young energy too. Young meaning newer in the industry, no matter the age that they come into it fresh, with their excitement and their ideas. I think it's such an inspiration. Correct. And that's one of the huge benefits to having such a multi-generational workforce, which is wonderful. And before we wrap, the last question I like to ask is, what book have you read lately that really made a difference in your life, no matter what the subject was, and that you think other people listening might benefit from reading? The Big Leap. Okay, awesome. Why did you love it? It really talks about working in your zone of genius and figuring out what that is for each individual, like what really just excites you. So for me, it is really about sharing, helping, supporting. So that's why I'm excited about this partnership with Salon, with the STX Inspire software. Awesome. I love that, because it's something that you're passionate about, that you're good at, that lights you up, which is great. Something for all of us to bear in mind if you're listening to this podcast is how to be a sponge and how to be open to new information, and also find what we really love and that we're passionate about. Man, your story is one of adaptability. You went from top to getting knocked down, to soaring, to getting knocked down again, and then to just making your way and finding yourself as adaptable. And I think that is, Charles Darwin said, it's not the fittest of the species that survives, it is the most adaptable. And ladies and gentlemen, we have an example specimen here who's joined us live and shared some of his takeaways from his multi-decade
It is a roller coaster.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much for your time, Mitch, for sharing your joy and your insights about being a leader in our industry. I'm so grateful that we were able to have you on today and to learn from you. Tell everybody where they can find you if they want to work with you or just follow your salon and what you're doing.
Yes. So website would would be inspireforsuccess.com. My email with them is mitch@inspireforsuccess.com. And you don't even have to have the software. It's still supportive about, these are the things you want to look for in your software. And when you go to that site, you'll be able to take a survey so we have a better idea what your pain points are and maybe how we can support you.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Mitch. Always a delight to share some time with you.